conduct roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. I'll just start this time at the end. Dr. Maddox,
Here.
Ms. Hull,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Ms. Davis, Ms. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Hensley,
Here.
Dr. Anderson,
Here.
and Dr. Gant.
Here. All right, thank you. So we do have a quorum. I'm going to move forward to item 3, and that is to amend or adopt the agenda. The floor is open.
I move that we adopt the agenda as outlined.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Dr. Maddox and a second by Ms. Hull. Any questions or follow-up comments about the agenda? All right, if you, those in favor of approving the agenda of the special call meeting, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the same signs. All right, so that motion carries. We'll move forward to item 4. This is to approve the Personnel Board report. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am. It is my recommendation that the board personnel report be approved as presented.
Okay. Thank you. The floor is open for a motion.
I move that we approve the personnel report.
Second.
All right. Any follow-up questions? Okay. All in favor of approving the Personnel Board report, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. I'm sorry, I thought
Aye.
if you raise your hands and say aye, let's do that again. If you would like to vote on the personnel, if you approve the Personnel Board report, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same sign. Okay, that motion carries 8-0. We will move forward to item 5. And item 5 is the action to appoint Dr. Robbie Hooker as Superintendent of Clark County School District and to approve the third amendment to the contract of employment between Ccsd and Dr. Zenona Thomas. The floor is open for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Maddox, a second by Ms. Gallagher. The floor is open for any questions or follow-up conversation. All right, all in favor of the red motion, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the same signs. Okay, so that motion carries 8-0. We'll move forward to item 6, adjournment of our special call meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hull, a second by Ms. Gallagher. Seeing that there are no objections, we are adjourning our special call meeting at 6:09 p.m. And we will resume our regular board meeting in about 60 seconds. So we are switching agendas. All right. Okay. So we will move forward with our work session agenda for September 1st, 2022. Going to call the meeting to order at 6:09 p.m. And Dr. Thomas, just for the record, if you would conduct roll call again for us.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Maddox,
Here.
Ms. Hull,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman, Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Ms. Davis, Ms. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Hensley,
Here.
Dr. Anderson,
Here.
and Dr. Gant.
Here. All right. So we do have a quorum. Again, we'll move forward to item 2, and this is to amend and or adopt the agenda. The floor is open.
I move that we adopt the agenda as outlined.
Second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion by Dr. Maddox and a second by Dr. Yeager. Any follow-up questions, comments, or discussion? All right. All in favor of adopting the agenda before us, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same signs. Okay, that motion carries 8-0. We're going to move forward to our informational items. I'm going to ask that you take a look at those informational items. And one is the Early Head Start, two, the Athens Community Career Academy report, and then the SPLOS Monthly report. Any follow-up questions or comments for Dr. Thomas and staff?
Can I add just a factual point? Because I know that we tend to have board discussions about where funds are coming from for Early Head Start. So in the report for the June meeting, as we know, the Early Head Start, the ELC reports are like months behind because of the federal improvements that have to happen. So in the meeting that is in our documents, they talk about salary increases and discussing salary increases alongside when we were having the same discussions here about salary increases, but that is coming from their pot of money from the federal government, and so that discussion is with the Department of Human Services? The Department of Human Services. So I just wanted to be clear when you're reading that that's what they're talking about.
Okay, thank you for that context. Dr. Anderson, any additional questions or comments or follow-up conversation about the Early Head Start or any of the other informational items? Okay. All right, we're going to move forward with our board community reports. And under the board community reports, we have the four areas of the Athens Area Community Foundation, Envision Athens, the Oversight / SPLOS report, and the Georgia School Boards Association. And so if there is any additional information that needs to be added or stated, or any follow-up questions that you all have or discussion areas that you would like to point out.
The meeting minutes for Envision Athens were just circulated. We have not voted on those yet, but as soon as we vote on them and approve them, I'll send them around to everyone.
In terms of the Athens Community Foundation, please let me know if you are interested in that particular organization. The next meeting will take place in October. I would love for you to join me if you want to kind of get a feel of what's going on. And then there also will be a follow-up to the information that I submitted. There will be a formal document that talks about the Clark County School District Fund.
And can you remind us, Dr. Maddox, that the meetings for that committee, when are they?
They're quarterly, so they're
Okay.
4 times a year. But there are other activities that take place, but 4 required meetings a year.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And so we can just reach out to you, anyone that's interested? Okay, wonderful. Any additional information or follow-up discussion? Dr. Anderson?
So with the GSBA, I did want to throw up on your radar that the annual conference is going to be December 1st and 2nd in Atlanta. So start marking your calendar if you're interested in going, and I'm sure Ms. Palmer will get that information out to us. And then some information did also come out regarding some language around public comment and why it's a part of our board proceedings, and you know, what the common language could be versus what we actually have in our language. So as we're talking about policy, you know, we can just refer back to that if that's something that we ever want to discuss in the future. But that's all I have.
Dr. Gant, referencing what Dr. Anderson just mentioned, Ms. Palmer has sent out, I think it's like a spreadsheet, if you're interested in any of those conferences. So if the one in December is something you would like to attend, please let her know, or go ahead and complete that on there, so when the registration opportunities come up or other arrangements that need to be made, she'll be able to jump on that for you all.
And just to
Small correction, it's in Atlanta, not Savannah, unfortunately. You did. You got me excited, and I was like, oh, wait, I don't think so, but it is, it's Atlanta. Fortunately, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would encourage us, yeah, it's sort of, the December one is typically in Atlanta, the summer one, Savannah. And so if you're able, or even just interested in going, I know we haven't really, COVID had shifted a lot right when we were getting on the board, but it really can be very helpful to get an idea of what other districts are doing, to reconnect with people that maybe we went through new orientation with. I know when we onboarded, we still really haven't seen some of those board colleagues, or we're just now getting, to reach out. But they really are good opportunities to see what other districts are doing and how they're doing, and like overlap in efforts and priority areas between the districts. So yeah, just put that information inside of the sheet that Ms. Palmer sent out. And most years, we do not use most of our professional development money. We do use it, or we don't? We're starting to, okay. I was like, we do? Okay. And so when we came on, it was just money that was there. And so I want to really encourage us, if it's something you're interested in or just curious about, to sign up. Dr. Yeager.
I was just going to ask, should we all go together if we can? And I mean,
What was
that's the
that
idea.
again? Can you
Should
say
we
that?
all plan to try to go together as a board? I know Nicole has talked about that quite a bit. So
Yeah, I think the more people, the better. And then it's not like 3 people that are coming back reporting, and we actually can sort of dispatch people to different things and report back out. So that would be wonderful if, if all of us could go.
Question.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Dr. Maddox was first. Go ahead.
You good.
Is it possible, in a situation like that, for our December conference, for the board members that will be joining the board, do they have the option to attend? They do. Thanks.
Okay, so they've already signed up. Dr. Maddox?
Madam Chair, I was looking for the email with the different conferences, but I had asked about the Charter System Foundation Conference. I've in the past paid, because I'm just interested in that even before the board, but it happens every year in October at the, oh, thank you, she's sharp where it is, in October at the University of Georgia. And it is an awesome opportunity to see what other systems are doing with their charter funds. And so I really would, suggest that, those, I know there are some people on the board who are really interested in the charter system and what other schools are doing. This is a great conference.
I think, because have you gone each year, Dr. Maddox? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. You went the first year or no? I'm just making up people that went.
I think you're making it up.
Okay.
I'm sorry. But I've heard really good things about it, and that the sharing is very powerful of, activities and initiatives and innovations that take place. And so, and we are actually applying, I think this year, based on some feedback that was given, for some of the recognitions and rewards based on our innovations that we take for granted frequently, things that we're doing, and we realize that we really are leaders in many areas in the state, just even looking at like the health clinic and that type of thing. So Mr. Nobles shared, and I'm looking at Mr. Gaskins, Mr. Nobles shared the other day that we are looking at applying for some of those recognitions.
Wonderful. So yes, Dr. Maddox, I know you sent it to me and maybe one other person. Can you reshare that with the board? Okay, because I don't think I forwarded it, or did you? Mm-hmm. Okay, that would be great. Okay, so Ms. Palmer will add it to her, the list. Okay. All right, any other areas? Under the Community Foundation, Envision Athens, Community Oversight, Georgia School Boards. All right, we are going to move forward then to item 5. And this is our Board Advisory Council update. I know that we've had some conversation around scheduling, and not just scheduling, but like rethinking what that board looks like. Not just what it looks like, but the mission, and then how we will actually go about carrying out the work. And so part of why it's here is because, well, 2 reasons. One, because historically when we've talked about committees, that has been an area that we've had a lot of questions around. So if you reflect back on our interviews with Cognia, there has just been a lot of conversation historically on committees in general. And as a result, we made some changes to committees. And our more recent report mentioned this. And so I did ask Dr. Anderson just to sort of facilitate a conversation so we can figure out what we're doing, what's next, if any changes need to be made. So I'm gonna turn the floor over to you, Dr. Anderson.
So in our recent Cognia report, we had made a lot of advancements. However, the way that we engage our board advisory council was one of the sort of still areas that we need to improve on. And I think their main concern, and you can please add anything that you feel like I'm missing, but their main concern was that we didn't really have a formal process with which we engage with them in order to make decisions moving forward. Many of our conversations with that council previously was more about historic things and sort of bigger perspectives and thoughts, rather than what are our agenda items, what are the things that we're discussing and moving forward with and considering in terms of initiatives, and how can we engage them for feedback. And then their other concern was just not really having a proper feedback loop, right? So they would engage and they would meet, but how does that information then come back to the board and guide our decision making? And so there needs to be sort of a more thoughtful approach to how we initiate meetings with that council, what our expectations are for what we get out of those meetings, and how that information then reflects in our decision making. And I was going to just kind of put forth a couple of suggestions and see how you all are leaning. And then if you all have any creative ideas that are different or maybe add to that, we can have that discussion just so we can get this council back on track and really use them this year and moving forward in a way that is adequately engaging them and getting feedback. So what are your thoughts on either trying to do monthly meetings right before the board convenes for our work session, and trying to engage the council on hot items that are on those agendas, not necessarily procedural things, but just items that we may want to get, just community feedback and community input on. That was one thought. That does take a lot more effort on the council's, end, as well as our staff and ourselves kind of having to convene those meetings monthly. So we're talking about 11 or 12 meetings a month. So that could be a lot. And the other idea was doing quarterly meetings, and us as a group deciding what are some of the initiatives or items that are pressing that we would like to have conversations with them about, that are coming forward in maybe 3 or 6 months, and then engaging them quarterly, so maybe 4 times a year, to have those broader conversations. So these would be more discussions on you know, kind of broader initiatives and not necessarily agenda items that are coming up every month. So those are just kind of two thoughts that I had. One is a lot more engaging and can probably get a lot more feedback on things that are more immediate, while the other is more bigger picture. So but is a little bit less time consuming for community members, which, you know, we want to be sensitive about. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I know that last time we talked about this a little bit. One of the things that the board members who are not on this, are not in these meetings said is that, well, one was what you said, so not getting the feedback, but then also the things that we talk about are not necessarily things that you would have thought that you wanted feedback on, right? So I think that the way that we've done it so far is we've had quarterly meetings and we have come up with things to ask them about, but you're right. I mean, they weren't necessarily tied to things we were voting on in the next meeting or two. So I do think the idea of tying it to items that are coming up is a really good idea. I don't know how logistically that would work every month, but then I also don't know if we don't do it every month, how we would be able to keep it tied to the agenda. So I think those are both good ideas. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to make it work the best. One thing I thought is that maybe we could expand the number of people on the council so that not everybody would have to come every month. That might lessen the burden on people. And then even within the board, if we did it every month, maybe 1 or 2 board members could sit on it every month and then report on it at that month's meeting so that it wasn't the same board members every time also. But those are just some possibilities.
Are there the opportunity to create minutes or have, I don't know, virtual meetings so that they can be recorded and then accessed by the rest of the board?
Yes, we've, if I'm not mistaken.
They are now, right?
Yeah, I think with Ms. Gallagher and Dr. Dykeman may be able to back me up on this, but I think we've had most of our meetings, well, all of our meetings today have been virtual. Yeah, and we've had meeting notes recorded, and Ms. Bones has been like the district facilitator or person that has helped move, you know, those meetings along.
I think the notes have been embedded in board updates. So you might have had to click on a link in those.
Well, then I'm rolling off the board. I'm thinking about being on the other side. So you know, on that same discussion about the note taking, it going to the broader community, what the main topics are, because I have issues with like groups of board people and community people. You know, that's a personal thing that I have, and I want to, you know, I like for it to be a greater conversation with other members when possible. Not a few people representing everybody, but that's my personal thing. But how can we make sure that whatever is being discussed with the community board, because they represent the community, you know, I'm going to want to know what are my people that represent the community at the community level, you know, what are they saying? Do I even agree with that? So would there be an even further output that could take place, even if quarterly, to kind of say, these are some of the things that we discussed in our community meeting, and, you know, here are some of the outputs that came from those discussions, or if there are things that need to be decided on, just making sure that it's full circle with all of the community, not just a few people, because we are already the board, then we have a community, and so I want to make sure that all the community can be included.
Any other thoughts? Okay. So what I hear is it'd be nice to have somewhat of a regular meeting schedule, so monthly or best that we could around that. Stagger meetings with having not necessarily every council member present at every meeting, but a good representation, and then having 1 or 2 board members at each meeting and rotating the board members who attend for each meeting. Does that sound about right? And then, okay, so that part I'm still kind of thinking over, but I'm wondering if maybe a quarterly newsletter to go out to the community via, I don't know, our PR person, maybe help, something like that, to engage the broader community, but I don't know the mechanisms of that quite yet, and that's not something that I think, that's not a decision that I should probably make on my own.
I'm wondering if one place in the middle might be, like, I know the notes, we have the notes and people can click a link and see the notes, but maybe if it may be possible for us to just get those notes sent out, but then also get the agenda sent out. You know, sort of like with all of our advisory board meetings, they're open, I think all of them are open to the public. So parent advisory board is open to the public, but they still have the parent advisory board, you know, that is really where a lot of the conversation happens. And so I wonder if it's, you know, because it's something we already do with taking notes, if we can, and we have the agenda beforehand, although I know there's still a question about, it has to be more of a board ran thing than us, you know, saying, Ms. Bonas put together the agenda, you know, things like that. But that may be a way that it takes out a step, so people aren't having to, like, come on to Assembly, click through the agenda, find the, you know, the notes and figure out what's going on, but it's just pushed out to the larger community after we talk about it. But then when there's a meeting coming up, just notifying the public.
Yeah, I like the idea of being more transparent to everybody, for sure. I support your idea about that. And obviously I've missed clicking on something because I don't have strong recollections of what the board's been sharing with us, and I haven't been to any of the meetings. So I, just for myself, would like to be more informed somehow, so.
Yeah, there have been some pretty good, I think, informative discussions, but I am going to defer to Ms. Gallagher and Dr. Dykeman and Ms. Bonas, because I think either the last meeting, I don't think I was able to make, or I had to leave early, but it seemed that the people on the committee really appreciated being asked about things from what could the board do better, or like what could the district do better, things like that. So seems like there was some appreciation for being asked, although it wasn't monthly, but it was still around like topics that we thought the community might want to weigh in on.
So to wrap up the conversation, I do like the idea of having monthly meetings. I think one of the issues that I can immediately think through is that the agenda is set so like right before we have our meeting. So there's very little time to engage anyone on the agenda other than ourselves in our rooms, reading through them very quickly. So I wonder if that might be a call to perhaps have the agenda set maybe a week prior to when we normally set the agenda, so that there is time to have a meeting with the board advisory council and then report that back to the board and community. So we're talking like, I mean, this would need at least a 2-week period. A few days is not something that I think can realistically be done. So that's the one sort of issue that we would have to kind of really think through. Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if, like, given this, and I know we're in transition, and I know different people, you know, like may work differently with how the information is out and when it's out. I wonder if we can possibly take the next week with this feedback and like just hop on a call and, yeah, with a recommendation saying this is what we think we need, just to be sure, you know, we don't get into October or, you know, November. I'm like, what's after October? And, you know, have to sort of start back over or do something a little bit different. So maybe what we've heard is that more communication to the public with what has happened in the meetings, perhaps meeting monthly and rotating board members so as not to have a, you know, a committee unintentionally, but rotating the board meetings, and maybe we can solidify that on a call and just report back out next week, or even before next week, whenever the call happens with a more concrete plan.
All right, that's all that I had, but I think that's good information for us to come up with something. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. So we'll move forward to the board president report. I don't have any additional updates, and I'm looking at Dr. Thomas and Dr. Anderson that I can remember. I do want to reiterate my appreciation and thanks to the board first for the retreat that we recently had. I think it was time well spent. Want to say again thank you to Dr. Anderson for coordinating the our strengths survey. I know that I'm still receiving information, and I know there is some interest in moving forward with some of the cabinet members and things like that, and really building on what we already have. And so just wanted to say thank you all again for your efforts and your openness, and yeah, I think everybody sort of approached Saturday with an open mind and left with something, you know, that we could use. So thank you all. Dr. Anderson and Dr. Thomas, is there anything else that I may be forgetting? I don't have, yeah. Okay. All right, so I'll move forward. We will move forward to the superintendent's report, and I'll turn the floor over to you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Dr. Gant, and mine will be brief as we have a couple of presentations tonight. But I did want to share I will be out next week because I'm attending, before we knew about the transition, if you all recall, and I wanted to just say this publicly, that the Georgia School Boards Association withdrew from the National School Boards Association, and from that they developed, I had to write it down, the Consortium of State School Boards, which is having their first inaugural Urban Boards Alliance Symposium. So this has taken, it's a lot. I had to draw myself a graphic organizer. So their first meeting is next Thursday and Friday in Atlanta, and I thought that it would be important, and this was before I knew Dr. Hooker was going to transition, but he and I have talked that we at least have some representation there to see what that process is going to look like, absent us being a part of NSBA. So I will be able to give you all feedback and give feedback to him. It looks very similar actually to the Savannah conference, some of the same speakers. Mike Thurman is one of the general speakers, but seems like some of the breakout sessions are very similar. But I would like to see what that structure is like so that you all will have that information moving forward. And then related to that, I apologize up front for missing the dedication next week, but I wanted to publicly thank Dr. Maddox and Dr. Moore and Ms. Palmer and others who have worked to make that a special event. So next week we will have the dedication of the space for Reverend David Nunley and Miss Eileen Nunley, who were both long-term educators in Clark County, and that information has gone out and excitement is really picking up. We had a request for 20 more invitations just this afternoon. So I think that's going to be an exciting event. It will be a small event, but it will be an honor to recognize both of those individuals for their contributions. So I did want to publicly acknowledge that that was taking place, and that was a result of Dr. Maddox's recommendation, and others will be doing something very similar, I'm sure, moving forward, but that is taking place before the board meeting next Thursday with a brief program recognizing both of them and their contributions to Clark County. So that's all that I had, and then if you want me to go ahead and move on, or if you have something.
I have a quick question before you move on. The new NSBA, I know it's not the NSBA, but the conference is next week. Is it similar to CUBE? It's not the general, you know how like we had NSBA and then the CUBE conference. Where does this one fall? Is it like the national one, or is it more specific to urban issues?
So
Or have you, I wasn't able to make it out, like what it was, I know what it's replacing, like when we pulled out, but I couldn't quite tell, like if this was more that smaller focus, you know, on, and maybe
Yes.
we'll know after next week. I just couldn't figure it out.
Yes, we will probably know more after next week. There are people from different states, and I was trying to find for you exactly which states are represented here, but there are people from multiple states that did decide to participate in this instead of NSBA. But the session, this symposium is called Urban Boards Alliance, but it seems to be a mixture.
Okay. Dr. Anderson just said that Dr. Wilson said that it does replace CUBE. It was just something in the wording that seemed a little bit more general. And so
Right.
I wasn't able to fully.
The sessions don't appear to me to be as broad as the CUBE conference sessions are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the CUBE sessions seem to offer a little more variety, in my opinion. When I looked at the sessions for this one, after we received specific information, because we have Baldwin counties presenting, Henry counties presenting, so that's why I said after I received the breakouts, it felt very similar to what we did with GSBA, more, but maybe maybe one or two of the general speakers are national, but one of the general speakers is Michael Thurman, so I guess maybe if you were coming from another state, he would be national, but for us, he's hometown, so so they have some general speakers, but when I started to look at the breakout sessions, they were very similar to what we did at GSBA this summer. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing about it.
I am looking forward to sharing.
All right. Yeah. So that was my only question, but you can continue with your report.
No. So that was the end of my report. We have 3 presentations, Dr. Gant. One was a brief presentation from the Urban School Human Capital Association, and they are going to do that because it is brief and did not want to, we didn't want to incur expenses of them having to fly in. But for those of you who don't remember, Ms. Hensley, for your benefit, there had been conversation requesting an organizational audit and a review of our organizational structure in the school system to look at the different positions we have, how the departments are broken up, how the work is accomplished. And so the Urban School Capital Group has worked closely with Dr. Blankenship in the past on doing some other human resource evaluations with us and looking at compensation structures. And so they were positioned to take on this work of doing an organizational study for us and to give feedback. So we had reached out, they did a scope of work submission for us. And so a couple of people had asked at a recent meeting if they could hear a little more and be able to ask some questions about that scope. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Blankenship so she can just say a little more about that and then introduce them via Zoom to us.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Wow. So I'm delighted this evening to introduce to you two of our colleagues from the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, Jody Spoler and Craig Chin, both of whom I worked with over this past year on our compensation work. And they both bring a wealth of experience in human capital development and supporting strategic human capital initiatives in urban school districts. So both have worked in roles previously in school systems, and so they are well positioned to provide the work that you are seeking and answer the questions that you're seeking to answer. So I'm going to turn it over now to Craig to present to you just briefly, and then be available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Selena. I am Jody Bookite-Spolar. I'm a partner with the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy. I reside in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm here tonight with my colleague, Craig Chin. So, Craig, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Craig Chin. I'm also a partner with Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, and my home is actually right outside of Boston, Mass.
So we have a very brief presentation, just 5 or 6 slides that will share a bit about our organization and then the central office review proposal that we have submitted for your consideration.
Jody, should I take the team through it?
Why don't you? That would be great.
Great. And everyone, please, let us know if you have any questions. We definitely have a spot in the end of this presentation for open questions, but if there's any clarification you need as we go through this, you're going to find it's only a few slides, as Jody mentioned, but let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow. So Jody, you mind going to slide 2? Thank you. So this is just a quick overview of Urban Schools Human Capital Academy. We are a nonprofit, started in 2011. Our founder is actually a former human capital HR leader from New York City, from Montgomery County, from Fairfax County, Virginia. And our team is predominantly made up of, I'll call it ex-practitioners. Both Jody and myself were chief HR officers in our respective districts. And we also have a number of other team members that were former superintendents, former teachers, and have varying levels of experience both at the school level and the school district. And as you can imagine from our title, we primarily started off, I should say, working with urban schools across the nation. However, we also started to make a shift, if you will, not only working at the state level, but also working with, I don't know if you want to call it rural or smaller, even some suburban districts, knowing that their human capital or HR needs may not be as big as in scope, but they're definitely as challenging, if you will, in those respective organizations. So with that, we develop, we support, we network human capital leaders in schools and districts. We also really try to leverage data in everything we do to make sure it's one thing to know that there's a number of initiatives that we work with various organizations on, but we also try to push them to see how can we actually measure this, both from a summative and a formative way to track progress. And at the bottom, it's about supporting districts in their efforts to deliver high quality services. So another part of our value proposition, if you will, we also try to help build capacity as well. We're not fly by the night, if you will, or come in and deliver a report and that's it. We definitely will also going to try to work with different stakeholders to make sure that what we are developing or talking about is something that hopefully becomes very sticky, if that makes sense. Thank you, Jody. This is just a quick map of various organizations and parts of the country that we work with. And there are a number of nonprofits we actually have partnered with as well that aren't on the map. So indirectly, we've also done some work in other parts of the country, but this represents those that we work with, have worked with directly. Thank you, Jody. I'm not going to read this in detail, but this slide is really to summarize or highlight the importance or their critical nature, if you will, of an efficient and effective central office. So one thing that we definitely wanted to unpack in our this potential project is trying to identify through a lot of due diligence that we anticipate, if it's like other districts that we work with, that there are going to be pockets of obviously efficiency. There are also going to be pockets of, if I can say the opposite, inefficiency. So where that manifests itself, you may find that there are certain work streams or processes or services that you might have many hands or teams working on a certain process, if you will. So there might be some redundancy or overlap. At the same time, there might be other areas that, yeah, it's a little bit undefined or gray area as far as who owns it. So we're going to try to unpack that in order to identify where there might be potential for improvements for efficiency. Because in the end, the other benefit of having more an efficient structure is maximizing the way you provide resources to different teams and departments. By doing that, it might also open up capacity for the district to focus on things that may not have been a strong focus in the past, but should have been. And these are just two high-level considerations as we embark upon this work. I'm going to start at the bottom first, is really one sort of belief around organizational structures being strategic and also flexible. And when we say flexible, for example, if we were to rewound the calendar maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, I don't think anyone saw, unfortunately, COVID-19, on our radar. So with that, a lot of districts had to make a pivot, whether, hey, we had to go from in-person learning to remote. With that, a lot of the nimbleness or flexibility that other organizations might have in place allowed them to make that shift a little bit quicker, if that makes sense. And then the first one is really about aligning the structure with the district desired outcomes. If there are, and we understand that there's ebbs and flows with funding opportunity, ebbs and flows with different focus areas. So at the same time, depending on what those focus areas are, both short-term and long-term, we want to make sure that is, or look at the question, is the organizational structure and the way the teams are set up to best support the district and their both short-term and long-term goals. And I don't know if the board had a chance to review our proposal, but this is really taken from our proposal. And I'm not going to read each one, but just to give a highlight, in essence, we want to do a review of sort of what is in place today, which is the current organizational structure. And that is both receiving information, that's also touching base and connecting with certain stakeholders, because even though we can see something on paper, there might be some nuances or the way work or teams are structured that won't shine through by looking at how boxes and lines, if that makes sense. The second part, we would want to benchmark sort of the both staffing levels and the way you're organized with other, not only districts of the same size, but also looking at some maybe other districts of different sizes to really try to push the envelope that there might be another way of looking at the way you organize. And then third part is about user satisfaction. We want to definitely do some deep engagement, some stakeholders, just also to find out that there's certain departments that identify maybe a customer as their primary customer or even secondary customers. We also want to hear from them to find out what is the output or outcomes of the services and supports that they provide and how does that manifest itself in how the team is organized. And then the fourth one is about suggesting refinements or recommendations on not only on roles, if you will, or team functions, but also on how the different teams are positioned vis-a-vis themselves, but also how they're positioned both vertically, if that makes sense. And last but not least, looking at workflow or process enhancements that can enable sort of a more efficient structure. And before I move off of this, the question I would, and we can get to this in the next slide, is we want to make sure that, whatever these steps are, however we format or propose the work, the structure of the project, we want to make sure it reflects the outcomes or desired outcomes that the board's looking for. So a question we would ask, if it makes sense to answer, is if I would ask, at the end of the day, at the end of this project, what would be an ideal outcome, or what question that we could answer that would meet your goals? We would love to hear even sort of top of mind thinking. Jody, anything you would add before the board?
The one thing that I would add would be to just reinforce that this is not about individuals. This is an organizational review. So there would not be any, outcome that identifies specific, performance issues or individuals by name, that sort of thing. This is a structural organizational review of roles, responsibilities, performance indicators, again, the efficiencies, the structures that Craig spoke to. So just wanted to, make that very clear. But with that, I think we would really love to answer any questions you have or get any feedback from you about, what question are you trying to find the answer to? What's an outcome, a desired outcome for you of this work? And just know that our goal is to deliver, the product, the outcome that you want and need out of this project.
So my first question kind of goes along with what you just said in terms of not evaluating performance. Will you be evaluating and making suggestions on positions if we have duplicate positions or a lot of overlap? Will your report or recommendations include positions for elimination or restructuring or those types of recommendations?
I'm not certain if I got all of the question. The sound was a little bit tricky. And Craig, I don't know if you caught more of it than I did.
I apologize. I did not as well.
Will you tell us where to trim the fat in terms of positions?
So although you won't talk specifically about individual positions, will you look at areas of overlap, places where there are duplications possibly in positions, and provide the board with ideas or recommendations around how to streamline the operations and streamline possibly departments or to make that work more efficient?
Thank you.
It's my cafeteria voice.
Yes, I think if I heard correctly, I would affirm what you identified, that this would really be giving first kind of that look in the mirror, providing you clear information, data, that reveals things about your central office that may be useful to you in recognizing capacity issues, that sort of thing. But we will also make recommendations in some part based on benchmarking and comparable districts, how they are handling similar situations and what we know to be best practices. We will identify for you areas where we believe there could be added capacity, maybe there's some overlap, so that's an opportunity to streamline something, and then you could drive, some of that capacity where it may be needed more. So those kinds of recommendations would be made so that the outcome is, where you are now, but also opportunities to make some shifts either immediately or over time that might better align your central office capacity and services with the goals that you're trying to accomplish for your students and your community, really.
Thank you. I have two more questions. In terms of the stakeholder feedback that you would like to receive, would that stakeholder be more community participants, or are we looking at teachers and staff who work under these departments? Who would the identified stakeholders be?
So, Craig, I can jump in and then you can add to it. I was going to say we would ask departments to share with us who they see as their primary customer. Who are they serving and how do they intend to serve them? And that would be one way that we would identify, well, this is the key customer. And we would want to understand, how that customer is receiving the services. That may be teachers, it may be other offices that have to rely, on a flow of information to do their work from another office. So that could be, something that is assessed in terms of whether or not that service delivery is efficient and effective. So we will try to, for each unit within the central office, get a good idea of who their key customers are, and then ask those key customers, what is happening from your perspective, from your end. And again, it's not in a gotcha kind of way. This is all around how do we enhance, how do we, make suggestions that will result in even better service, to enhance what is already happening.
Thank you. I actually don't have any additional questions.
Additional questions? Ms. Gallagher?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so on the slide, it says the importance of an efficient and effective central office. Who defines what efficient and effective is, and where's that baseline?
Was the question who defines efficient and effective?
Yes.
So that will be some of the stakeholders, whether or not the feedback from individuals who are the recipients of the services of central office report that the services are being delivered in a high quality way. It may be benchmarks that are in your strategic plan, whether or not data is being provided, those kinds of issues and services from central office, we will try to garner from, again, any goals that are in the strategic plan, from identified performance indicators that probably exist for departments. So those kinds of resources we would review and really work with your leadership team to define what does it look like to really deliver this service efficiently and effectively.
And if I could add, and I agree, 100% agree with what Jody was sharing. I think the other way to look at sort of what's efficient or what's effective is also the relative trend over the past few years. And we know the pandemic has thrown a wrinkle in all of this, but at the same time, if there are certain service levels that we can find out from a few years ago, which way have they been trending? And, depending if they're trending up or down, that could also inform us whether, it's more efficient from the past or less efficient from the past. So it's also comparing it to themselves, if that makes sense, over time.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add that, we have to be alert that rarely are comparisons directly apples to apples, so to speak, but we will do benchmarking. And if we are able to share with you that, in another similarly situated district or other groups of districts, something is being done, in a more streamlined kind of way, or just producing greater efficiency in terms of its output, that would be an indicator that perhaps there are opportunities to do this function more efficiently or more effectively in Clark County.
Okay, I have another question. So my question is, will you be looking at data, our achievement data, because we're in the business of serving students, providing education to them? And the reason why I'm asking that is I'm interested in knowing if effectiveness of our current structure would be measured against previous structures and the achievement data of our students.
Craig, do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, do you mind starting, Jody?
No, I was going to say, I think that, certainly student outcomes are the end goal here. I know I just worked on a central office project where one of the student outcomes that was not meeting expectation was reading at grade level by 3rd grade. And in doing the organizational review, one of their goals was to add capacity and effectiveness from the central office in terms of supporting the achievement of that goal. And so, what central office structures were involved in that, How were they delivering services? Did they have enough? Did they need to trim somewhere else if they were going to add capacity to the central office supports against that student outcome goal? So that's one way that student goals and student outcomes really inform where capacity rests, where it needs to be added, because when we speak about a central office structure, it should contribute to the organization's goals. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
So yes? Yes? Is that what you're saying? You'll be doing that?
So sorry, we are struggling with the audio.
Use my outside voice. Are you saying yes, that is what you'll be doing?
So I think the question was, would we consider student outcomes? And I was offering an example where the structure of a central office may need to consider what the goals for student outcomes are to make certain that the central office is able to support those goals. Again, that would be in our meetings with the leadership team to understand the areas where they want us to review for those kinds of issues.
And board, if it helps too, we've done this in the past, and I think as many can probably appreciate this comment, is that there's certain departments that might have a more direct influence on student outcomes, and there's some that are going to have less. I mean, one can definitely make the leap that, like, for example, transportation, if you're getting, students to schools on time and obviously safely, then obviously it enables them to be in their seats in classrooms. So there's definitely more of a direct impact. And there's others that might not be as direct, if that makes sense. But I think what we can do as we start to review, as Judy was referring to, not only on who their customers are, but also trying to get a sense on what are both your short-term or long-term goals. And another question we'd like to ask is to certain teams, like at the end of the year or end of the day, how do you know you're successful, or how do you know your team is successful? And part of that is trying to make the linkage, if that makes sense, to student outcomes. Some might be easier than others, but I think having that conversation at a minimum definitely is helpful. And then trying to make that link can definitely help with the overall sort of study.
Any additional questions?
I'm not sure if this question is for our speakers or for all of us. So I don't think I've seen the proposal. Are we going to get the proposal at some point, or will we see the proposal? I just looked through the various things and I didn't see it. Maybe I missed it.
So it was forwarded to the board a couple of months ago when we had the same conversation and you hadn't gotten it. So I will go back and forward again.
Thank you. And my other question is, of course, we just voted on a new superintendent. Have we touched base, or will we touch base with the onboarding superintendent or incoming superintendent for this process? Because he's coming in about a month or so. Or will we do this before him?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think we're sort of in a transitional period, and so really it's not much that is on our agenda, or major purchases and decisions that he either has not been updated on or have been sort of staffed with him. I know Dr. Thomas meets with him pretty regularly, or has a couple of times a week. So yes, he will be aware, and I'm sure we'll share any additional feedback or any recommendations for even changes with us.
So will we vote to approve this funding for this project, or has that already been done? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get up to speed on where we're at.
It hasn't, not.
We have not voted. I didn't
No.
think so. Okay.
No,
So
this
that'll
is
be on a
informational.
future approval. Okay. Thank you very much.
There was a question that was raised by a board member who's not present today, and it was about whether or not one of the services you might be able to provide is a salary breakdown by demographics? Should I repeat that? Oh, okay, thank you.
Got it. So the question is whether a salary breakdown by demographics, is that the question? Yes. So I think, Dr. Blankenship, we did connect with her briefly just to get some clarification. I think the easy answer is yes, we definitely can do that. I think, and this might be a further conversation we can have, but depending, I guess the question we would have back, and we're not expecting an answer right away, but we would want to, I mean, doing the analysis, yeah, that definitely can be done. But I think the broader question would be, is what question are you trying to answer, which will kind of lead to what kind of analysis should be done. For sure, slicing and dicing data, that could happen, but I think it's important to get a better sense, which we do have that better sense on the compensation structure, and also sort of, now obviously there's one thing to have a structure, another thing to actually have people in what they earn, which is obviously a very important part, both professionally and personally, and I totally understand that. But to do the analysis, I think it's important for us to sort of get a better clarity on what are we trying to, or what's our hypothesis we're trying to test in order to do the analysis accordingly. But the short answer is yes, that's not a worry at all during the analysis.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think that concludes our questions.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Blankenship, for arranging this for us. And rolling right into Dr. Blankenship is now our presentation around our strategic priority number 4, which is human capital, promotion, retention, induction, and all of those areas of work. So Dr. Blankenship is here with some of the members of her team, and they're going to give us an update around our human capital and development work.
Good evening, Board. I am very excited to come here tonight and share with you, along with my team, about the work that we've been doing over the past year. As you know, this has been a very busy year for our human resources team. We've added some members, filled some positions that were vacant, and we are excited to share with you the progress that we have made over the past year on some of our strategic initiatives, but also as we end this very intense hiring season that we have just completed, we want to share with you a little bit about the new hire group that we have coming into our district. And so I would be remiss if I did not give accolades to the team that we have. All 12 members contribute in some way to this work. This is not the work of one person or a couple of individuals. All of our team members have contributed significantly to the work that we have been engaged in over the past year. And so tonight with us we have Mr. Dan Swartz, who is our Executive Director of Talent Management, Mr. Christopher Penley, who is our Director of Employee Development, and Ms. Meredith Paget, who is our Director of Employee Relations. We also have the person who keeps it all together for us and keeps us running, and that is Ms. Kelly Wegman, who is our Executive Assistant and Evaluation Platform Administrator. And she truly is the backbone of our entire team and make sure that we have it all together. Our other team members that we have that contribute to this work are Mr. Latura Hunter and Tanya Arnold, who work with our benefits and leave support. Julie Coyle, Lakeisha Jordan, and Tisha Eccles, who directly support our schools and facilities, and then Ms. Jenna Bell, who is our certification specialist. And then you all, if you have come in during the day, have been able to meet the last team member, which is Ms. Dana McDaniel, who is our new receptionist, and she's been a great addition to our team as well. So just a reminder that our primary goal with human capital and development is to recruit, develop, and retain effective teachers, leaders, and staff who meet the diverse needs of our students. And that really falls into three major areas: to recruit, develop, and retain. And that's what our presentation tonight is going to be centered around, those three priority objectives. So I'm going to ask Mr. Swartz to come up and share with you around objective 4.1, which is to implement a recruitment and selection plan that attracts highly qualified candidates of diverse backgrounds to our system. And he has some exciting information to share with you.
Thank you, Dr. Blankenship, and good evening, board members. So I'd love to give you a little bit of a review of the hiring season that we just went through. So a little bit of the numbers. In total, we had 457 transfers and hires across all schools and departments, 160 school-based transfers, as well as promotions, a combination of the two. Looking at just the new teachers that we hired, there were 197 as of the start of school. That brought us to around a 97% teacher fill rate, which is a little average for the nation right now with the teacher shortage. And I would be remiss if I don't pause and say a lot of work went into those numbers by the school teams and the hiring that they did over the summer. It was a summer of roll up your sleeves and burn the midnight oil to interview and find candidates and to hire for them, as well as the work of the HR specialist that I support to handle all of those transfers and hires. A little bit diving deep, some data into the new staff members. So I want to highlight the new staff that we brought in, some statistics for you. As you can see, the elementary teachers that we hired were more than any other category, and that's just obvious by the number of schools at the elementary level compared to the middle and high school level. The one thing that I did want to draw our attention to is where new teachers live. The majority live in Athens, which I think is fantastic. But there is a significant portion that do live outside of Athens and drive in. I think that is a glass half empty, glass half full, however you would like to look at it. The positive aspect is that we do have a reach and can communicate with candidates and prospective teachers to come and be a part of the Clark County School District. And so they are willing to drive in and be a part of serving our students, which I think is fantastic. The challenge, though, is lots of times we hear it's significantly hard to find affordable housing. And so that's the other downside to that piece, and that's what we hear most of all. And that was a number that we wanted to take a look at just simply because of the communication that we had with the prospective candidates. There is opportunity to grow with male to female teacher ratio. We are on par with national statistics. It's usually around right at 24%, so we're right on par with that. But I do believe there's opportunity for growth there. Looking at our staff and digging into where are they in their career, 70% of them are in the new teacher phase. As you can see by the numbers, that's a pretty good proportion. I am excited to see the 30-year plus. That's exciting to see a number of teachers who have had that many years of experience come back and continue to work for us. The interesting thing about this statistic, though, is the next slide. So although 70% are early in their career, they are actually well educated. And so that was an interesting piece. In fact, we have more people with advanced degrees than bachelor's degrees. And so I thought that was very interesting. The preparatory pathway, I am excited for the work that Christopher Penley is doing with the classified to classroom pipeline. I know that was some work that you all put in place a couple of years ago, and I think that is yielding some fruit. So I am excited to have different pathways and pipelines for teachers individuals to come be teachers within the Clark County School District. I think in our current context, we need as many pipelines and pathways as possible in order to bring the best quality workforce to our students. Looking at a little bit deeper, the great news is that our staff is diverse and growing more diverse in our recruitment of teachers. And so you can see that we had almost a 10% increase in Black or African American teachers, as well as a 3.2% increase in Hispanic teachers. That's something that we are going to track regularly, and we want to see that those numbers continue to improve. A couple of reasons why we think we have seen that is just the increased diversity in school leadership, as well as the classified to classroom pipelines, as well as a focus on competency-based selections as opposed to just simply degrees and certifications. With all the good numbers, I am a glass half empty kind of person, and so I just want to name some opportunities for us. 97% fill rate is great. There was a lot of hard work to that, but I want to get to the point where we're at 99% plus. That's going to be a goal for us. The gap right now is the critical need positions, so special education, math, and science. And I hope you can see that we're going to put some things in place to hopefully close that gap. In addition to the fill rate, talent pool levels were low. I'd love to see more candidates to select from. Increased efforts are going to be necessary in that area to kind of increase a talent pool. We need to work on our efficiency of hiring workflows. We want to make sure that we are recommending in a timely manner and that we are moving them through the hiring process in an efficient manner, as well as the timing of hires. We saw that our most significant portion of teachers were hired maybe later on in the summer. And we're going to have to organize ourselves so that we hire earlier in the hiring season to get the best candidates available. And then the other opportunity, which Christopher will talk about, the things that we're putting in place, but I really see an opportunity to capitalize on our pre-service teachers, the development of them, as well as the recruitment of them. We are in the backyard of UGA and Piedmont and a few other universities, and we want to use that to our advantage. And so I'll turn it over to Christopher to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. So when Dan talks about those teacher candidate pipelines, really one of the biggest opportunities we have and the most accessible candidate pipelines we have are student teachers. So even though the pandemic made it a little bit difficult for us to place large numbers of student teachers in our schools over the last few years, we are beginning to rebuild that program. For the fall of 22-23, we have 110 pre-service teachers placed in our schools with about 50 more observation candidates left to place for this fall. And we're hosting candidates from UGA, Athens Tech, Piedmont, Bernal, Georgia State, and many others. One of the most interesting things to come out of the pandemic is the prevalence of online-only teacher prep programs. And so in addition to those local universities, we also have candidates from USC, from California, local residents who are participating in those programs online around the country. We're also taking advantage of our charter flexibility, and right now we have 2 undergraduate student teachers who are serving as teachers of record. These are undergraduates who had served previously as parapros in our schools and had a lot of familiarity with our schools, whose principals were comfortable with them taking over that level of responsibility. My goal, and I hope to see those numbers increase as we go forward through the next couple of years. In addition, we do recruit actively from our student teacher population. We recruit both formally through student teaching events. Last year we held sort of There we go. Thank you. So like I said, we do recruit both formally through student-teacher events. Last year, we held sort of a commencement for our student teachers. This year, we're holding quarterly events where we're starting just by helping our student teachers reflect on their experience. We're moving into helping them write their resumes. We're doing mock interviews, and then we're holding a commencement for them. And we're doing one of those events each quarter to maintain connection. And then I do a lot of outreach with UGA and Piedmont in speaking to their classes and offering just various outreach to them. After we hire employees, though, we also have a responsibility to ensure that they have opportunities for growth and development and advancement. And the first opportunity we have to develop our employees is through new teacher orientation. This year, I tried to work really closely with our instructional services department to get feedback on new teacher orientations of the past. And overarchingly, the feedback that we got was that it was overwhelming. Both participants, presenters, building level leaders all used the term drinking out of a fire hose, and so we made some changes this year to try to address that feedback. You can see that we broke our new teacher orientation into 3 parts. The first one was our instructional orientation. We hosted those in June and July over the summer. We had multiple opportunities that candidates could choose from to come in and work with our instructional services content coordinators to learn about their content, their standards, and the instructional practices that we use consistently in CCSD. Part 2 was our new teacher welcome and kickoff. We welcomed all of our new teachers on July 26th, I believe it was, for a day where we taught them about the assets within our school communities, and we taught them some of the specific strategies we use to create positive school climate. And then finally, they had part 3, which was their school-based orientation and opportunity to sort of get to know their new school home. You can see some of those numbers over on the side. 2 things that I want to point out. For those of you up there who are going back through the numbers, and they know that Dan shared earlier that we hosted or we hired 197 new teachers. For NTO, we do invite transfer teachers who have changed into qualitatively different positions, and so that's why that number is just a little bit higher. The second thing that I want to point out is if you look at the picture that's in the middle, I believe it's 3rd from the left, that is our homegrown cohort, so that's just over 40 teachers who either attended or graduated from CCSD schools, and as a CCSD graduate myself, that's a powerful thing. Some of the reasons that we made those shifts, one was to get some improved contact with candidates. If you're hired in March and you don't really go to orientation until the end of July, that's a long period to go without engagement. This engages our candidates a lot earlier. It allowed us to chunk the content, so providing multiple sessions over multiple time periods allowed teachers the opportunity to reflect on and internalize the information before learning something new. The other really powerful part of that shift was it allowed our instructional services team to really target individual needs. And so every class of teacher that came to new teacher orientation got something specifically for them. If you teach 8th grade math, you got something for math teachers in middle school. If you teach chorus, you got something for arts teachers. If you teach special ed, you got something specifically for special ed teachers. And the feedback we got from all of that was very positive. It also allowed us to prioritize content. The bottom line is that 3 days is not enough time to give people every single thing that they need in order to be a successful teacher. And so our goal was to give them everything they needed in order to hit the ground running, so to speak. And then finally, by prioritizing content and distributing things over a long period of time, we were able to keep our kickoff positive. We definitely need to learn about ethics. We definitely need to learn about benefits. But when we bring everybody together, we really don't want those things to get in the way of us learning about our community and figuring out how we're going to serve the community. We don't stop our development of teachers at new teacher orientation. We also have a full year-long new teacher induction program. It is broken into 3 pieces. We've made just some very slight tweaks to this program for this year. The first part of our program is job-embedded professional learning. These are activities that we're creating collaboratively through our Instructional Coaches PLC with our instructional services team that are then delivered at the building level. When I say job-embedded, what I mean is we know that conferences take place every October and March, and so there's no reason that we shouldn't be doing professional learning with our new teachers around how to successfully have a conference in October and March. And so we're trying to build our induction program so it's meeting the needs of new teachers as those needs arise. The second is the mentor-mentee relationship. We know our new teachers need somebody to go to commiserate with, to get the information that they need about how their school works, and that's what that piece is for. And then the piece that we've added this year is professional support systems. Seeing how many teachers were coming through non-traditional means, we wanted to build up some professional supports, and so we've partnered with UGA, Piedmont University, and some of our other education program providers, and they're going to be providing some optional professional learning in the evenings that we'll be prepared to offer to our new teacher cohorts. So if you think about what a new teacher gets over the course of a year, weekly they're getting check-ins and collaborations with their mentor, they're getting a coaching cycle if needed from their instructional coach, and they're getting communication from our induction support team. Every month they're getting job-embedded PL, they're engaging in mentor tasks like observation and feedback, and they're doing optional mentor PL sessions. Quarterly, we're working to have dinner dialogues and other larger professional learning events, as well as after-school optional PL. And then yearly, we have our new teacher orientation, and then each year we finish the year with some reflections. We're not going to stop at year one. We are focused on year one for this year. As we move into 23-24, we'll start building out year two of our induction program, and in 2024-25, we'll build out year three. To inform that work, Clark County applied and was selected to represent our RESA and our P20 Collaborative on the Governor's Office of Student Achievement Induction Task Force, and we have a member of HR also working on the National Working Group for Teacher Retention, and both of those groups inform this work. Finally, this is one of the things that I'm most excited about. We are offering development not just for new teachers, but for all of our teachers. You heard Dan talk about some of our high-need areas, and this not only provides incentives for retention, it also helps us recruit, but it also develops some of that capacity that we need. So we are offering master's degree cohorts in special education and middle grades education, two of our critical need areas. We're providing those heavily subsidized and at very low cost for our teachers. And we are hoping to get those started in January. Each of those cohorts comes with a 3-year retention commitment. So after students or candidates finish these programs, they'll be committed to staying in Clark County for 3 additional years. In addition to that, we're offering 3 different endorsements in addition to the gifted and the ESOL endorsements that we've always offered. We're offering teacher leader, instructional coach, and MTSS. Those are also completely free for teachers who apply and are selected. And for those, we're also compensating teachers for their time by paying them a stipend for it. So these are both recruitment strategies and selection strategies, but they also show that we are investing in our teachers, and hopefully we'll convince them that they want to stay and make their long-term home here.
So we know it's important to develop our teachers because they are the individuals that make the biggest impact on our students, but leaders come next. And so as we've talked over the course of the past 18 months about developing pathways, one of those is a pathway to leadership. We've talked about pathways to leadership in all areas of the organization, but you got to start somewhere. And so knowing that we need to have a strong pipeline of school-based leaders, we are developing, have developed this pathway to leadership for school leadership. So as you've heard Christopher talk about how we support new and novice teachers to become effective teachers, and then those effective teachers to become the teacher leaders in our school system, we also now are turning our attention to how we develop assistant principals, and those are done through Lunch and Learn series and individual support. We also provide opportunities for assistant principals for leadership development through cohorts such as the Northeast Georgia LEAD program, of which over the past several years we have had participants, and we have participants again this year. As well as they have an opportunity for the Gale Aspiring Principal Academy, and there are other opportunities that we are working towards as well. For our principals, we've really focused this year and last year on providing strong support for our new principals. And so they all receive job-alike mentors, they all receive a performance coach, and they participate in a principal induction cohort through monthly meetings, and that this year is through Georgia State University's Principal Center. They have a very long-standing, highly respected principal development program, and we're excited that we are able to offer our new principals an opportunity to be a part of that, and we'll look at that over this year and look for other opportunities to support our other principals who are beyond that induction phase. Finally, we want to make sure that we are increasing the retention rate of effective teachers, leaders, and staff. All that we've talked about up to this point should help us do that, but we also have some other strategies in place. I'm going to ask Ms. Paget to come and speak to those.
Good evening. I am super, super excited to tell you guys about this. One of the things we've heard is what makes people stay in a district is feeling engaged, feeling welcome, feeling like they are a part of the organization. And I'm so thankful that our district leadership and our board has supported us to try to help our employees find their fit in our district, whether they're new, recently recruited, or whether they've been here for a long time and are still trying to figure out their place. And so to that end, we have launched our Find Your Fit program, and it is targeted on physical fitness, emotional fitness, and financial fitness. And we rolled it out 2 weeks ago, and it has just taken off like crazy. The first part being the physical fitness. Right over here in the gym, we have the gift of space. And so we have used what Piedmont had as a fitness center and built from there. It's got some commercial grade cardio equipment, weights, all sorts of workout equipment. And I would also like to invite our board members to please fill out a waiver and come work out with one of the 89 staff members who has already taken advantage of our gym in the first 2 weeks. Today, you would have seen 21 people in the gym. That's fantastic. We also have an Adopt a Spot program. One of our former students just painted this beautiful mural for us. If you go out the Hill Street exit tonight, it's lovely. We also have 12 garden beds that Tanya Arnold, who is our leave specialist, worked with me to put in this summer. I don't know if y'all have met Miss Arnold, but she is one of the hardest working people on the planet. And this is really one of her pet projects. I'd also like to say there are 3 beds open still, so if any of our board members would like a bed, I can help you with that as well. And then we have partnered with both our trauma-informed specialists here in the district. They have put wellness rooms in a lot of our schools and worked really hard to have these little just spaces for our teachers where they can come and relax and have a moment, and they're beautiful. But we've also partnered with some businesses in our communities, and our first 2 partners are Jittery Joe's, who, if you show your CCSD badge, will give you 10% off of your beverage, and our YWCO, who gave us an amazingly generous offer. They get 5 free visits and their corporate rate, which is a huge savings to our staff members just by showing their badge. We're going to continue to grow this. I have a list about 30 people long to call, and we just want to keep going. We want our community to be able to support our staff and just give them some love. And before we move on, I want to say we're also looking at, under financial fitness, how do we do more targeted financial communication to our staff? And in doing that, we're looking at having small groups where we can identify specific common needs with focused education on finances. And so that might be, for example, I am a PSERS retirement employee with less than 10 years to retirement. What are my specific needs? And then going to where those staff members are and meeting them in their work location. We've also heard from the board that you guys would like for us to look at how we specifically can help our PSERS staff members as they ease into retirement, and we have begun to research that and try to put together some proposals that I hope we'll be able to bring to you guys in the near future. But I think I've said 100 times when I've told Dr. Thomas how excited I am. This is the best part of my job. The only thing that would be better is if I were doing it at Disney World. So this is great, and I'm so thankful that you guys are letting us do this for our staff.
So before we end, I just want to reiterate how committed we are to our mission in HR, which is to provide excellent customer service to all of our stakeholders by responding to those requests in a timely, efficient, courteous manner, but also to employ, develop, and retain staff members who will positively impact student achievement, because that's what we're here for, our students. So with that, we'll take any questions that you have.
The 2 student teachers who are serving as teachers of record, what schools are those teachers at?
They're both at Alps Elementary.
Thank you.
So I have 2 questions. The first one's more of a suggestion for your financial piece, but I'm gonna ask it as a question. Are we currently helping teachers navigate the student loan debt relief for being teachers?
Actually, we are.
Okay.
So we have, through Clear Concepts, who is our benefits partner, we have a program, and the name is escaping me. Got Zoom. Crazy name. But they can work through that program to help manage and alleviate their student loan debt. And I feel certain that as a part of that, we haven't had the discussion since the legislation was signed, but I feel certain that that is being incorporated into those Got Zoom sessions. And I'll verify that with Mr. Kieshauer.
Yes, ma'am. And my other question is about exit surveys. So has there been any consistency with comments or suggestions? I don't know what is asked on there, that we created some solutions around to better retain staff? Is there like one thing that stands out over anything else?
So I'm not sure right now that we have one thing that is standing out. As you know, we redesigned our exit survey, and we've redesigned how it's being delivered rather than it being distributed at the end of the year. It is being distributed as employees leave through our employee records system. And we are actually even looking at how to improve that further. So it's a part of the process when they notify us that they plan to leave, then that'll be a part of the steps that they have to take so that we can get more responses and more feedback. That is typically the biggest issue is the response rate with exit surveys, and we're trying to increase that. Of course, we always reach out to employees when we know that they are leaving for specific reasons, and we may want to find out more about that. And then we also have employees that reach out to us for exit interviews. So we are still incorporating those as well. Mr. Swartz, if you have any additional information about that. But we will definitely keep you abreast of any trends that we're seeing in our exit surveys.
And that goes to all staff, not just teachers?
Yes, ma'am, all staff.
I'm definitely excited about the pathway to leadership. I've talked with some people in the past, and I've actually told them to reach out to you, and I hope that they have. I wanted to know what is the first step for them to be identified? So if their principal don't identify them for some reason, or if they go to their principal and they're not chosen, how is there a self-enrollment process?
Sure. So the criteria have changed a bit over the past few years. There was a point in time within the past 5 to 7 years when individuals had to have that nomination of their principal or supervisor in order to enter a program, and that is no longer the case. So there is a self-selection part now. So if there is someone who is interested in leadership, please do have them reach out to me. We have opportunities if they don't have leadership certification, if they're just wanting to learn more about what it is to be a school leader. We have opportunities for them to, the LEAD program has 2 cohorts, one for aspiring leaders and then one for current leaders. And we typically have individuals in both of those cohorts every year. So that's an opportunity.
Has the program started for this year? Because I know one of the persons had asked about it last year, and the year before, and so somehow they're not getting the information about when the program starts. So has it started this year?
It has started for this year, but it's early in the year, so it is something that I can always reach out to. RISA is a wonderful partner with us, and we have a very, very strong relationship. So I can't promise that there will be space available, but if there is space available, they usually do allow people to enter after, typically not after the second or third session, but after the first session if that has already occurred. So that's something that we can always look at, but please have them reach out to me so that they can be on my radar and we can work together.
So thank you very much. This is great. I was really excited to see on one of Dan's slides that a large number of new teachers are coming with experience. Have you considered, or can I encourage us to think about reaching out to some high-performing teachers who may have left the district in the last 5 to 10 years and see where they've gone and whether there's any way of bringing them back? I know lots of reasons for why people leave, but there are some who might be encouraged to come back with all the changes you all have been making, and I didn't know if that was part of the plan, but.
We're always open to any suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
With the pipeline, like with the new teachers, can you remind me the pipeline for high school students? Like, isn't there, at one point, wasn't there like a pipeline to build like teachers from
Yes.
our high school students as well?
Yes, and that is an area that we want to further build on.
Okay.
We have that CTAE pathway, and so that is an area that we'll be looking at as well. I'm going to actually, Dan and I are both attending the American Association for Employment in Education conference, and it is a conference that is open and has people from educator prep programs, K-12, human resources. So there's a wide variety of individuals that attend this conference, and so they have one of the sessions that I noticed was around the Educators Rising program, and that is specifically focused towards the not recruiting necessarily, but gauging interest and encouraging and in supporting high school students who to go into education. So,
And we also have the teaching as a profession pathway that our students are able to participate in at the Career Academy. They have the high school pathway, and then do they still have the college course, Mr. Gaskins? But we do have the high school pathway of teaching as a profession, which is a really good entryway for our students to begin getting exposure. But I know we had some conversations, even this was pre-COVID, but how to expand that and support those students beyond the Career Academy, but to have other opportunities where we did something where if they went away, went into education, came back to Clark County Schools. So that had been some conversation at one point. But the teaching as a profession is a good way to really start introducing our students. Our students are also able, and again, this was pre-COVID, so we're just moving back to being able to do internships in our buildings, especially in our early learning center. They were with Ms. Higginbotham's group, but after COVID, we had some restrictions of them being able to get into those classrooms, but that had been a placement site for many of our students, which was a great entryway and exposure for them to really begin to see what it's like to be in the teaching profession.
yes, and I'll say in some of my previous roles, both as principal at Hillsman and in my previous role like this in another district, one of the areas that students were able to do those internships in was in special education, working with our adaptive PE classes and working in some of our self-contained special education classrooms. For students who are very interested in working with special needs populations, that is a great way for them to begin to engage and learn more about what it means to be a special education teacher. And so I would love for us to begin exploring how we could expand that opportunity for our students, especially those that are in the teaching as a profession pathway, because of special needs being, or special education being one of our critical needs area.
I just want to echo about the Educator Riser program. Dr. Elder started that program at Cedar Shoals, and it also gives a lot of scholarships. And so 3 of our students were able to get pretty good scholarships from that particular program. And also, she will be teaching it at the Career Academy, where she is this semester, and very excited. And I understand that the students are excited and have smocks, and they chose purple, which is my favorite color. But they're very excited. So, I love, education, and especially, students who want to become teachers. So that particular program, that Educator Rises, was definitely a highlight a few years ago.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Wait, I just have, I love the find your fit. I love that. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we could think about the board possibly supporting adding some space on the east side for these activities, so that people on that side of town don't have to come all the way over here to access the gym and community gardens and such.
So Ms. Paget has actually explored that, and she's not given up on that. Actually, we have some things going in place soon. But we do have some things going in place soon, she says. So,
just to answer, we're working with technology right now because we recognize that
Can you speak up just a little bit?
I'm sorry, is this better? Okay, we recognize that sometimes geography is a bit of a barrier, and so we're working with our technology department so that even if we host a class here or in one of our quadrants throughout the district, we could possibly Zoom it into locations all over the place, and maybe eventually even staff members could do it from home if they chose to. So we've been discussing with the YMCA and some of our local providers, and actually some of our retired teachers who are fitness instructors in their retirement, who are interested in giving classes to our teachers and either Zooming them in or having them based at different quadrants throughout the school that kind of align with the middle schools. Does that help?
thank you again for all of your support. It is not always the case that Human Resources Department has the support of the board in the way that we do, and we appreciate that and look forward to our continued work.
Thank you to our HR team for that presentation. And lastly, we have Mr. Gaskins, and as Dr. Gant reminded me, this presentation is one that is pretty routine from usually Dr. Ramirez. It is just required for his approval for the CTAE and our Perkins local plans. So Mr. Gaskins has promised to keep it quick for us because it is a repeat of what you all have to hear annually.
Thank you for prefacing that, Dr. Thomas. Yes, this is a required annual report. Dr. Ramirez is zooming in on Zoom just in case we have any questions for clarification. So we will accomplish two things during the presentation. One is to provide an update on our CTAE programs, and the other is just to provide information on our CTAE and Perkins local plan and federal dollars that we need the board to approve so we can receive those. Just a quick overview of our CTAE program staff. Dr. Ramirez, he leads our CTAE programming and it's actually a K-12 programming with our budget assistant who works in our office, Sharon Bates, and we have 2 work-based learning coordinators, Ms. Tammy Cottle, who is our work-based coordinator at Cedar Shoals High School, and Katie Ansley, our work-based learning coordinator at Clark Central High School. So some of the program highlights, one that we received a competitive CTAE large equipment grant for $99,000. We were able to buy a tractor for Cedar Shoals High School, a farm bot for Clark Central. We have a mini sit-to-stand transfer lift at Athens Community Career Academy. So if you click on the link, which we won't do today, but at your leisure, there's a list of other items that we were able to buy with the competitive grant that Dr. Ramirez and his team wrote. And you can see the picture of our Cedar Shoals High School students in front of that tractor. One of the other things that we wanted to highlight is just the data that supports our CTAE, all of our students being CTAE pathway completers, meaning that they take 3 courses in a pathway and then sit for their pathway assessment. The data shows that 96% of those students graduate on time compared to the 83% Georgia graduation rate. So we really want to encourage all of our students to take their full pathway and then sit for the pathway assessment. One of the things that Dr. Ramirez and I have worked on since my arrival here is really encouraging our students to sit for their pathway assessment. So we would have students that would take all 3 pathways and not sit for the assessment. So this chart shows that back in 2018-19 school year, we had 37 students that would sit for the pathway assessment. Last year, we had 144 students sit for the pathway assessment. So there is no harm in taking the pathway assessment, but we want to encourage students to take the pathway assessment so they leave our school district industry certified. And we will continue to work on those numbers to increase those students that take their end of pathway assessment, as well as the pass rate of those students.
Just a quick question, Mr. Gaskins, is there a fee associated with that?
There is no fee. Another thing that we are really proud of is that we've been able to provide some additional industry recognized credentials of value for our students. So ACCA has provided some summer programming in welding and in health science. We had 13 students this summer earn their American Welding Society certificates, and there was a 100% pass rate, and there was no charge for that certification, Ms. Hull. So all of those students were able to take their certification exam, and all of those students passed, which we are very excited about. And that was in the summer, as well as 7 students earned their certified nursing assistant, their CNA licenses this summer as well. So we have placed in our ARPA budget the funding to support summer programming for CTAE, and we will continue to do that. One of the other things that we're really proud of is the number of students that have been able to advance to national competitions. So as you can see, we have a student that is advancing based on graphic design, and we have several students from Cedar Shoals High School as well as Coyle Middle School that are advancing to the national FFA competition. The other slide, which is part of our strategic plan, is the number of 8th grade students that are earning high school credit. So we have 2 middle schools that are offering high school credit in the area of CTAE. That is BHL Middle School as well as Hillsman. You will notice in 2020-21, we had a 95% pass rate for our high school basic ag science course at BHL and a 78% pass rate at Hillsman. This past year, we had a 98% pass rate for students at BHL and a 100% pass rate for students at Hillsman. And then Hillsman also added, I'll let you clap for that. Hillsman also added digital technology that also had a 100% pass rate. So we are encouraged with the increase in achievement from 2021 to 21-22, not only in the pass rate, but also increasing the number of students that had access to those courses. And I know the question that you may have, which I have for Dr. Ramirez, what about Clark Middle? And what about, I had a brain freeze, Clark Middle, Coyle, thank you. Coyle was on the other slide. And Coyle, we are working on providing those high school courses for them as well. Thank you. It's been a long day. So the business of tonight, on our consent agenda, we will be asking you all to approve our Perkins 5 plan, as well as approval of accepting the federal dollars that come with that plan. The amount this year is $161,000 as compared to our FY22 allocation of $184,000. And so it just fluctuates from the Georgia Department of Education each year. So components of the application, which are on in Assembly, are really around these four major things. So informed by a comprehensive local needs assessment, and I'll go into that a little in just a second, from multiple stakeholders around the needs of our CTAE program. And then we look at 6 different elements. One is on student performance, one is on the size, scope, and quality of our CTAE programs. Another is the labor market alignment specific to Athens and our surrounding area, making sure that our CTAE program supports the needs of our community. Next is our career counseling and guidance, recruitment, retention, and professional learning, and equity and access. So we look at overarching needs identified based on results of our comprehensive local needs assessment. And then we have program improvement based on 10 core performance indicators, which I'll go over in 1 minute. So we started this work back in August to January of 2022. And we engaged a lot of stakeholders. So we interviewed parents of CTAE students and teachers around the needs of our CTAE programming. So we spent February gathering data around what we learned. We've analyzed that data from March into April, and then Dr. Ramirez and his team completed the Perkins 5 application based on that feedback. So based on the feedback, there's a list of 10 items that we wanted to make sure that we included in our plan. I'll just read the top 3. One was to improve program quality by increasing the number of industry-certified programs in the Clark County School District, so making sure that when those students finished that pathway, that they were industry certified. The second is there is a need to increase communication about our CTA programs to internal and external stakeholders. So we want our students to know that any student and all students should participate in CTAE programming, and they should sit for the end of pathway assessment. And then the third, increase the integration of employability skills across all CTAE programs. And then you can just take 1 second and just read the rest of that list. So we just want to make sure that all 10 of these items are addressed in the plan. Our next slide shows our indicators for performance levels. As you can see, we've met our targets, and those first items, our graduation rate, our extended graduation rate, academic proficiency in reading, language arts, as well as math and science, our post-program placement, as well as our non-traditional program concentration. Where we need work is on our participation in work-based learning. So we have about 15% of our students who are in pathways participating in work-based learning, and our target is 30%. So at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned 2 names of our work-based learning coordinators. We did not have those work-based learning coordinators last year. We do have them this year. We had a work-based learning coordinator at ACCA, but we felt the need to make sure that those individuals are in the building working with students, just not at ACCA, but also at Clark Central and Cedar Shoals. So that is one improvement that we've made, and then those individuals were internal candidates that are working very closely with Dr. Ramirez. And then the last indicator that we need to work on is the CTAE pathway completion. So increasing the numbers of students that take the end of pathway assessment and pass the end of pathway assessment. So we will continue to work on that pass rate with our students and our teachers. So this last slide just shows the amount of money we receive from federal grants, from state grants, and from our state agricultural education grants that we use to fund our CTAE programs. You can't see it because Dr. Ramirez is covering one of those items, but there are 2 asterisks. The first one is the Program Improvement Grant, and then the second one is the Agricultural Education Extended Year Grant. We match, those are matching grants, so when those federal dollars of $161,000, we match that with our local funds. And the same thing with our extended year. We pay our agricultural science teachers all year, because if you've been into any of our middle schools, there are ducks and goats and chickens. They take care of those all year. So there is additional money that we receive from the state to pay those teachers, not only for extended day that you see listed, but also for an extended year. And so, Dr. Thomas, I think I kept it within the time frame. That concludes our presentation. And if there are any clarifying questions, hopefully I will be able to answer those. And Dr. Ramirez is on Zoom as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. Yes, and you shared some exciting news and a lot of success of our students to really help prepare them for post-secondary opportunities. So we're really excited about the strength of our CTAE program. So thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Ms. Gallagher does?
I do, but I don't know if to ask them now or when we get to the consent agenda. Now? Okay. How many students with disabilities are enrolled in CTAE pathways?
I don't know that offhand. Dr. Ramirez, are you aware of the number of special education students that are enrolled in CTAE?
I don't have that number right in me, but yes, we do enroll students with disabilities. And so to the point where they even apply to the Career Academy and are also accepted at the Career Academy. So that's not a barrier for students of disabilities to actually access programming at the Career Academy. But I can actually get that the exact for you very quickly, sometime next week.
Okay, so we can get that number to you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know we added a special education teacher. So if we're talking about just CTAE, or are we talking, because yes, so we did add a special education teacher this year to Career Academy, and I think when Mr. Thomas presented a couple of months ago, he shared that information, that was an add-in position so that students with IEPs could receive services and collaborative support in addition to additional academic support while they were there. So that was a change this year for the Career Academy that has not been in place in the past.
Yes, ma'am. And the reason why I asked is, so on number 2, it says, where do the biggest gaps in performance exist between groups of learners for each core indicator? And then the answer or the reply is, our biggest gaps in performance is generally with our students with disabilities. And then students with disabilities is listed for every area as the first. So if we don't have a large number of students with disabilities, why are we blaming anything on them?
You're looking at the actual plan that is
Yes.
attached? Okay. And I don't want to misspeak. I don't think that we're blaming. Yeah, I think that might have come out in the interviews with the focus groups and the surveys that were sent to parents as well as students and teachers. But that is something that we can definitely follow up on. I would imagine that we're talking about their performance in the pathway and their performance in the end of pathway assessment. But that is something that we can look into.
Okay. And then in that same section on the bottom, my question is, what work is currently underway to increase the completion rate of 4% for limited English proficient students? So this is a plan, and we listed the things that are not working well, but not the things that we're gonna do to improve it.
Is that two questions? Is the first question is?
Kinda, I don't know. However you want to answer.
Okay, so I think,
all over the place.
so the first part is, one of the things that we're doing is that we are expanding the knowledge around CTAE courses for K-12. So usually that, or in the past, CTAE has not been introduced into high school. So we are making intentional actions, leadership actions to introduce CTAE as early as fourth and fifth grade. And so the other part that we're doing is we're making sure that we're working with our EL coordinator, which is David Forker, that supports programming for our elementary, our middle, and our high school, so our EL students are aware of the programming that we have, and then they feel more successful in the programming that we have. The other thing that we are doing is that Dr. Forker also is training all of our teachers, not just our EL teachers, how to support students where English is not their primary language.
And then the last one that I remembered from my list of stuff from at home, I think Dr. Thomas answered, and my last one was, in here is listed, the students with disabilities are underrepresented, and then she said that someone was hired.
That's correct. We do have a special education teacher for the first time that's on site now, working directly with those students, meeting with teachers on collaborative strategies, providing academic support to the students, making sure that those IEPs are followed, and giving, other instructional assistance as needed to ensure that, one, we're able to support the students that are there, but also to increase the comfort of students who have not gone, maybe because of IEP limitations, to have them feel more comfortable and supported there.
And if I could add to that, Dr. Thomas, and we're also looking to expand our CTAE courses, just not at the Career Academy, but also at our high schools. So students would not need to leave their traditional comprehensive high school to start into their pathway, and then they'll be more encouraged to apply to go to their Career Academy when they take their second and third course.
So last week, I'm still getting caught up on the vernacular and just general terms. But last week I went to the charter systems workshop that was here, and they talked a lot about the Diploma B pathway. And I'm wondering, how does that incorporate into what's happening with CTAE and the Career Academy now, and how can we better structure it or I guess bolster it so that we are really capturing students early who have the option to do the Diploma B pathway?
So it is really about, which we identified in our needs assessment, about the internal and external communication with students and families. Traditionally, as they discussed in the training, is that we are preparing kids to go to college. That is what has seemed to be communicated to parents. But they have this option B where you can graduate by going through a different pathway. So it's just not, in my opinion, the education that needs to happen around the CTAE courses. It's the education that needs to happen around what is required with option B, which is the advisement that we give to our high school students, but also the communication that we give to our elementary parents, our middle school parents, before they get to high school. And so that's something that Tessa Barbazon, who is our Director of School Counseling, is working on with our counselors who meet with students. And one of the requirements that we're working on with our high school principals is that our counselors are meeting one-on-one with every student on their caseload and telling them about their options. This is option A, this is option B, this is where your grades are, these are things that you can explore. As well as, and Dr. Ramirez has helped us inform this, that sometimes kids were taking the pathway as the elective just to meet their graduation requirement and not completing the pathway knowing that they can get industry certified or meet the components of option B. So it's going to take a lot of communication on our side, but we have to communicate to our parents that there are different options not related to the traditional way of graduating on time.
So I have a child in high school and he skips advisement. I just want to admit that, and I think that that's a general trend with our high school students. And so they are missing this information because I think that the way that advisement is currently structured, they don't find it to be helpful or informative at all. And so we are missing the opportunity to engage them in option B in the 9th grade, where we are getting the highest dropout rates.
So if I could add to that, we are in agreement with you because we know the number of students that are missing. So that is why we are requiring our high school counselors to meet with them around graduation and graduation requirements. And we're changing advisement, and it's a big lift, around more of the SEL things that need to happen, more of the interactions and the becoming socialized in high school compared to if you don't take this class and pass this class, you're not going to graduate. We have to put that responsibility on our school guidance counselors, and they have to meet with these students one-on-one. We can't have a whole group sort of thing where we're saying these are what the requirements are, this is how you graduate. We have to pull their transcript, meet with them one-on-one, ask them what their aspirations are, and actually provide guidance counseling and just not advisement. So we receive that.
So I guess one question that rings out, and you don't have to answer it, but I understand that, but I think I remember the ratio of our guidance counselors and the students and the amount on their load. I wonder about the feasibility of them meeting one-on-one, but we are, as a district, are we promoting early all of the different types of options that families will have, and what does that, and you don't have to answer it now, but me just thinking through, what does that look like? Are all families getting the same information about all of the different options? Are certain options prioritized or given more deference or more resources? So those are the things that I'm just wondering, too, as a parent who has a 9th grader and an 11th grader, how do we really maximize that information out there for families?
And I would say I don't have an answer for that yet, but I did meet with Dr. Thomas today for my one-on-one, really about defining the role of our school counselor versus some of the other things that they've been required to do. I'm meeting with Dr. Scott, who's our new Chief of Student and Family Supports, next week to really talk about this is what our school counselor provides, and then the gap around mental health and SEL and PBIS, whose responsibility is that? So our school guidance counselors, especially at the high school level, do have the time to actually provide guidance counseling that helps our students to be college and career ready.
I have a quick follow-up that I just thought about, and I'm wondering if conversations have been had around how middle schools in some way may support, because really by the time a student is in 9th grade, and even if they're having that one-on-one with a counselor, there's so much information that a 9th grade student is receiving, and even parents, like if somebody would have even told me or my child that I wouldn't remember it. I don't know if I remembered it when they were in 8th grade either, but I'm just wondering, like, you know, we still have the conferences. In high school, we have conferences too, but we're already planning, you know, for the students' scheduling, you know, during that last conference. I guess I'm just wondering about, might there be ways, and I don't know since I'm not in school, so I don't want to speak for like middle school staff and colleagues, but I'm thinking like that is such a heavy, it seems like a heavy lift for counselors. And it also, you know, I just sort of wonder how do they balance that, because there's already an overwhelming mental health need at the high schools. And I know we have that, you know, our mental health counselors and trauma-informed specialists, but there's a significant mental health and behavioral need at our high schools. And so I'm just trying to figure out, I know our teachers, we have the teachers advising program, so I'm just trying to figure out, are there any other ways, or in addition to that, that middle school may support? And then, you know, might there be implications for the board as far as staffing needs for advisement, so that it is done consistently and it doesn't like overburden counselors, really, or teachers as advisors?
So one of the things that we've identified in our strategic plan is that our middle school students will have an individualized counseling plan. So this counseling plan is to prepare them for the classes they would need to take, so they, when they get to high school, they are more prepared. We also have, and I can't think of the name of it right now, a career module that is required that students do, as well as something that identifies their career path. So, say it again. Science. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. The feedback that I've gotten from students is we take it every year and nobody discusses it with us, right? So I received that, but that is really the part of the plan and part of also the middle school counselors' work. And so I will say there are a lot of needs in our schools, and there are a lot of things that are put on our counselor. Some of those things are appropriate, and some of those things, they're the only person in the building, so they think that's who it should live with. So Dr. Scott and I, as well as Dr. Thomas, we really have to do just a cross-section of who's responsible for what, because our counselors are so important to our post-secondary options for students. And they are doing a lot of mental health supports. They're doing a lot of SEL. They're doing a lot of counseling with families, which is needed, but they might not be the person that is the primary person that's responsible for that. So when we think of Tier 1, what everybody gets, that's the counselor. When there are more intense things such as Tier 2 or Tier 3, that might be a more specialized person, not the school counselor, but the mental health counselor or the social worker or someone else that can provide that extra level of support. Because really, our counselors are supposed to connect families and students with the support they need and not always provide it directly, because they're responsible for all of the students at Tier 1. So we just have to think about what that structure is. I don't want to ask for more people yet, because that's maybe not what we need, but we really need to look at the job descriptions of people that we currently have and make sure that everyone is doing what is needed to support our students.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to be sure that that mental health component is not lost as a part of school, you know, a school counselor and what they are charged with doing according to, you know, the School Counseling Association in schools is certainly, you know, guidance. And, you know, being able to be a part of, you know, some part of the SEL and emotional support. But I think I feel and get, you know, what part of the tension.
And I can also add, not to cut you off, I'm sorry if you were.
Yes, I was.
Okay. Ms. Barbazon, our counselor, has also presented, there's, I can't remember the name of it, but something therapy. There's a therapy organization that she wants to connect us with. So when there are more severe counseling, mental health counseling needs, this is a service that our counselors can connect our families with, that can actually come into the buildings to provide mental health counseling for our students or work with the families. So that is something that we are exploring that should be no cost to families, because we can bill Medicare or we can add it to our ESSER funds that we have to support families.
I also received an email this week from Mr. John Thorson, who is the headmaster at Athens Academy, and he had reached out to us as well as Oconee County Schools, just really talking about the mental health needs of our students in Athens, Clarke County. And it was to bring our counselors together with their counselors, with Oconee's counselors, to really look at what we can do to collaborate to support those mental health needs, realizing that there's a lot of going between of those students and interactions with each other, and encouraging us not to approach it from such silos, but how can we come together and identify ways to really address some of the trauma and mental health supports that are needed in our Athens-Clarke County area as a whole. So I connected Ms. Tessa Barbazon with him, and she will be working with them. So I really appreciated them reaching out as well to say that we need to look at this collectively and support each other in that work. So that's also some conversations that will be taking place over the next month.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to drag this out, but just related to that, we used to have a counselor collaborative with, and I'm not sure the status of that, since the pandemic. Also, in a lot of our state schools, actually private and state schools, that have masters in counseling or PhDs in counseling, counseling psychology, clinical psychology, family therapy. I'm blanking on campus. Family therapy, our School of Social Work, and educational psychology. So we, here at UGA and also at some of our state schools, there may be opportunities to leverage relationships. It is delicate work, so you don't want just anybody coming in and saying do a group, but there really are some opportunities to leverage relationships with graduate programs for students who are well equipped already to work with our students to offer more intense groups, like process groups and things like that. And so that might be an area of exploration, because most times is not a financial cost, or if it is a financial cost, it's very, very small to the district or the schools that may decide to partner with those programs.
We turned the brief Perkins report into, it was not your fault, Mr. Gaskins, we apologize. And Ms. Gallagher, there are 66 students currently served either with an IEP or 504, and they are all actively enrolled in a pathway at Athens Career Academy.
Thank you.
I'll say one last thing and then I'll move on, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Bringing it back to CTAE.
Yes.
Has there been, I know that I've seen some discussions in some other meetings, I think the stakeholders meetings for ACCA or the board, talk about other career pathways that should be or could be integrated, and why aren't we doing construction and carpentry? Like, why?
So we can, and that is something that we are looking to expand and do, as well as HVAC. So I did attend the last board meeting. Part of it is around space. So we have the space and renovating the space, which is the next step. Part of the plan or the data collection that Dr. Ramirez and his team did is that we visited, I think, 6 other career academies to see some of the things that they were doing. Construction, HVAC, those were really big things that we saw. We saw what those labs looked like. At the time, the central office was in that building, but now really the sky's the limit around that. So there is a plan, there is a facilities plan that we are working on for ACCA so we can expand our pathways. First, making sure that that pathway is needed in our area and that we have the space to do it in our building, which we think that we do. And then the other part of that plan is if we are going to put construction and HVAC at our academy building, what are some of the pathways that can actually exist in our comprehensive high school so we can continue to expand with some of those specialized pathways. So that is part of the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I request a 5-minute break?
You read my mind. It's 8:30. We'll take a 10-minute break so that we can break, stand up, and we'll start back at 8:40. All right, we are ready to start back. Okay, so we are going to continue with number 9. These are the policies for review by the board. Dr. Thomas and Ms. Bones.
Yes, so last Friday in your board update was a summary, and they are also on the agenda item. In short, there are 4 policies proposing to rescind, 3 policies. These are from the policies that were discussed at the ad hoc committee meeting. 3 policies with more significant edits. There were 2 additional policies that we edited or proposed edits based on the other edits. And then there are 2 policies that were not on the ad hoc committee's agenda, but have come forth through recommendations from the district. And I can answer any questions that you may have. There were 3 policies that have been rolled over to be further discussed at the next ad hoc committee, which is September 12th.
All right, so just for the sake of, I guess, understanding, can you just go through each policy, not thoroughly go through them? I know we have like the information here, but just in case we have specific questions, we can go in order. So can we start with, let's just say, IFBC? I think that was that the first attachment? Let's see. Yeah, can we just go through the attachments just to be sure there are no questions from different people?
Sure. So I'll give you a minute to read so the highlighted, the red are the crossed out, the greens are the additions.
Were there any questions as you read through this, board colleagues? All right, the next one. That was the home study one. Any questions or feedback? All right. Next. This is a recension, right?
Correct.
We did get an email from a parent asking if their student could stay in the district, because otherwise would have to pay tuition to stay in the district even though they had relocated to a different county. So we deferred to our policy and said no. So this may be something that for future, if that's something you all want to consider, we could think about. Although for now, I support the policy as it is.
I think in that conversation, was it a full, I can't remember if it was a full, okay. But I asked Mr. Pruitt, just for more, somebody had reached out. They really had a positive experience with the district, if I'm not mistaken. They had either gotten a job somewhere different, but at any rate, they were going to be in a different county and asked. And so that's where that conversation was. And one of the, Mr. Pruitt, maybe you can add what you shared if you remember.
Okay. It's optional. Some school districts allow you to attend with tuition. I mean, candidly, one of the issues with that in Clark County is it's widely considered and known that Clark County has the best special education program in the Northeast Georgia area. And you would have potentially a lot of out-of-county students that any tuition you could charge would never cover the expense. So that's at least one consideration in opening it up to tuition students.
Do you remember, like, so there was a time when people could attend Clark County with?
Not that I recall. Dr.
Oh,
Thomas,
really?
do you know? I don't remember it ever being, us ever having out-of-county.
Okay, okay.
The policy that we are recommending rescind said tuition was last offered in 2004.
I'm just curious. I mean, I support the rescinding of it, but this is something I'm curious about. Like when it was offered.
It says tuition students enrolled in Clark County prior to the 2004-2005 school year.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just more curious about when it was offered, what was it like? You know, what was the impact on the district? Do we know that there was a significant impact on, let's just say, our special education services, or, you know, the number of people that receive those services? But yeah, so I support the rescission of it, but I'm certainly open and curious about conversations for students and families that want, you know, that want to be a part of Clark County. Which one is that?
So this one is exactly the same as IG. If you look up IG, it's exactly the same. We don't need to.
Were there any questions or feedback about the one that was just up? I think it was contests.
So that one's an exact duplicate of KHB, also titled Contests for Students. So rescind one and update this one.
I thought you did a nice job editing this one.
Thank you.
Okay. Any feedback for, okay. Next one.
So this one was a funny one. And I didn't know about the policy, which is the state requires us to have a policy about getting Social Security numbers from students, but it also allows for us to allow them to not give us their Social Security numbers. It's very strange. So we trimmed this one down to say just that, that we ask because there's a law, but we also are allowed to give them a waiver. So they do not have to give their Social Security numbers.
All right. Any questions about this recension or? Okay. Any follow-up comments? All right. Any? Nope. No follow-up? Okay.
So these policies are not up for a vote this evening. They're going out for public comment. They won't be up for vote next week because we need to leave them open for people to have time to comment on them. And so you'll see them again at the October board meeting, and at the October work session, there'll be a whole another set of policies that were last reviewed 5 years or more, as well as any additional policies that come forth through district staff.
Can you remind me, I know we had this conversation before, but I just cannot remember, with the one with the criminal background check, GAK, that one? Or am I, when it was changed to every 5 years as opposed to every 1, what was our conversation around?
Oh, I will have to go back and look.
Okay.
Remember,
I just can't remember when I feel like we have talked about this before, like this one in particular.
a criminal background check is not on this evening.
Oh, am I looking at the wrong?
Agenda.
Are you referring to the criminal background check for our volunteers?
Yes, am I pulling up, do I have the wrong policy up?
I think so.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Vaguely remember, I think we changed a certain group of our staff to be checked every 5 years instead of checked every 1 year. It might have been classified.
I remember it being that, and then
Certain non-certified staff, I think we switched
Okay.
from
Okay,
one every year to every 5 years.
Okay,
think
I
that's what we did
apologize. I
maybe
think I
3
got,
months ago.
okay, I think I pulled up had the wrong one up on my list of policies, so. All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you, Emily. You've been terrific with this process.
Thank you
Yep.
all.
All right, we'll move forward to personnel recommendations.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Gandy, it would be my recommendation that the personnel addendum and list be placed on consent for next week.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Thomas?
It kicked me out. I got kicked out and had to. I'm looking at it.
Yeah. Is it showing up in everybody else's? Okay, all right. All right, so if you have any follow-up questions about the personnel list, be sure to reach out to Dr. Thomas. We will move forward with the consent agenda. Okay. So with field trips, that's the first item. Do we want to leave that one on there? Consent? All right. Work session minutes. All right. Sorry, my computer here is, board meeting minutes. Okay. Accepting the funding allocation for the Clark County Nita M. Lowry 21st Century Community Learning Centers Pathways to Success Program for middle school students grant. I'm sorry. All right. Okay, and 5 is accepting the funding allocation for the 21st Century grant for elementary school students.
And these are our programs that are served through our Boys and Girls Club, the 21st Century Service with tutors and support.
The capital outlay application. Okay. CTAE, the local improvement plan. All right. The purchase of the new box truck. All right. The purchase of supervisor work truck. And the purchase of AED devices for each school. Okay. And then lastly, the Georgia Conflict Center. Okay, pull. All right. So we're pulling item 11 from the consent agenda. Want to open the floor for any questions or further discussion?
I have a question. It's not for Georgia Conflict Center, it's for the AED. Oh, sorry. It's about the AED devices for each school. So are we going to review those next time before we hit 15, almost 15 years?
I would hope so. So I don't know if you know this or not, but this is my second time being employed with the district. So when I worked here before, I started in 2006. In 2008, those AEDs were purchased initially. And so when I returned about a year ago, I noticed that some of the same AEDs we were still using. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're still working. The primary issue we're running into is getting the pads and batteries. We have many schools right now that are using expired products because we just can't get them.
Okay.
So that's our main problem right now.
Okay. And then it says something, I think it's like cabinets or something.
Yes, ma'am.
Those are cabinets to store those?
Those are the cabinets that hang on the wall, and the AED just sits in it, and we have one
Like that
out.
one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And those are going to only 13 schools? Or I don't remember the numbers.
Yes, the reason that number is different, some of the cabinets we currently have, we can just reuse them.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, okay, so a question is very similar. Were we able to work out the first aid kits, the requirement piece, and get funding to all the schools so that they can purchase the required?
Yes, that is in progress. The POs hopefully will be finished soon. There's been a bit of a delay in making that happen just simply for finding the number of first aid kits that we need, finding a vendor that can provide that many. And so we have found that vendor, and so now it's just a matter of getting the POs. But Finance was able to get that money sent over to my budget, so we are ordering those.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any more questions? All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we want to keep the purchase of the AED devices on consent? Okay. And we pulled the Georgia Conflict Center, so I do want to carve out some time for questions.
I did have a question. Do we have any data about how how that's working, and I don't even know if I guess directing it Dr. Thomas, do we have data from what GCC has done? Do we have data from like the trainer model so we can kind of compare and see? Because $100,000 is a lot of money.
Yes, ma'am, and I agree. And, excuse me, one of the things we have asked, and Dr. Scott is new to that role, but if you want to jump in, please feel free to do so. One of my concerns has been that we have contract amounts for one amount, and then the final amount has significantly exceeded in some areas what the contract amount was, so that's something we've agreed to look at and work on. In regards to your question with data, that has also been one of my concerns. In being completely transparent, what happened last year with some staffing changes resulted in Ms. Talbert working in some other capacities last year to assist at Classic City. And so the ability to get in and monitor and collect that data, because the goal was for last year to be a year where we had data on both programs, implementation of both, and being able to compare and see. So now that is a priority for Dr. Scott for this year. So we did lose that year in terms of being able to really monitor, but that is a very high priority for us this year, and also for Dr. Hooker. In our conversations, he realizes that that's something we need to determine, and not saying that IRP is the way either, needing to see, is that the trainer model working, but what's working, and if, or is anything working, and if not, then what do we need to do to really revisit that? So I met with Dr. Scott earlier today, and that was one of the things on our agenda, and as I said, it's been on the agenda with Dr. Hooker, because that is, financially, we need to see what the value add is for our students, and that is part of the reason why you'll see that in this, it's just the 3 schools that had requested to stay there last year, and we have not expanded that because we need data, and we also added that with Mr. Malik as a requirement moving forward this year, and not only data at the end of the year, but we have requested quarterly checkpoints to be able to see what's being done, because restorative practices are more than circles. It's a change in mindset and how you approach and how you interact and how you deal with each other. And we want to be sure that that's being done in a more pervasive way. So I was nodding when you were talking, not to nod to say, yes, we have data, but to nod to say I'm in agreement 100% with you that that has to be a priority of focus for us. You're very welcome.
I can say that when I was on the Cedar LSGT in like 2017, we had data at the time justifying continued spending on the effects of the restorative practices at Cedar. And I think we also looked at data at the time for Clark Middle, because that was started earlier. So there was data showing discipline rates declining with the circles and with the approach, because that's why we decided to try it at Cedar. I'm really sad that they're not doing it at Cedar anymore, but maybe the other group is doing it at Cedar, I don't know.
Yeah, as I recall, there was an RFP and it was awarded to IRP, but these schools really wanted to keep GCC, so, yeah.
And we allowed them last year to stay with that, and the plan had been to be able to have data to compare at the end of the school year, so now we're starting that process over. Thank you, Attorney Pruitt.
Dr. Tuckman, so did the program continue last year? It continued, or it just wasn't monitored? It's
Yes,
like you
ma'am.
wanted? Okay.
And both, there was also some initial work with IRP, but not at a level where it was embedded in the practices across the school to really give a true picture of effectiveness. They started some trainings. There was like a implementation group that was going to go out and push out, but then Ms. Tolbert wasn't able to monitor that and implement it at the level that we needed, because she was then split between those other buildings.
And colleagues, I don't know what the opportunities are, but I did sit in on that initial training as a board member, and I got to see, so I'm sure as they roll out additional trainings, that might be an opportunity for you all to see up close what's happening with that model too, because it was informative.
Was that with the IRP? The group?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. That's all.
Is there a way to, trying to see how to say that. Is there a way to get ahead of one individual impacting the implementation of an entire program that has cost us money for that year? Is there a way to get ahead of that? Since now we've lost a whole year because of one individual not being able to do this, and that just seems like a huge loss for us.
Yes, ma'am, you're correct. And Dr. Scott was just saying to me that she has dates for when we are already starting that rollout now, and the process that has started. Yes, that was a loss, and a loss that I did not realize that it was not being monitored until we were kind of too far ahead, because I thought it was still being implemented. Some of the information I had received suggested it was still being done. And then when I started asking for some data, and that's just being very honest, and it's like, well, it wasn't done at the level. So we do have now set dates and things that are already started, and I was just leaning over asking Dr. Scott to make sure we get that in the board update, because you're right, that was a setback for us last year. And you might have asked something else, I'm sorry, she was telling me about the dates. Did you say something else, Dr. Anderson, in that? Okay.
I have one question and one comment. So this particular contract, this is for this current year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
For
and that
GCC.
work has already, it's ongoing currently? So
It's a continuation of what GCC had been doing with those 3 schools for the last, depending on which school, 2 to 3 to 4 years, yes.
Okay. And then the other comment was, I know that Danny was here, but now he's not here.
Yes.
But he did tell me also that he was planning to do a presentation in a couple months at a work session or something. So he would be presenting information.
He did request to be able to do a presentation about the services. At one point, he had asked about doing that tonight, but in consideration of the fact that this is not about going against the other company because we already have a contract with them, it was not appropriate at this time for that presentation. But I told him that I would speak to Dr. Gant and Dr. Anderson for an upcoming board meeting for him to come and just share an overview of what was being done at those 3 schools and the work, but wanting to be clear that we were objective in not presenting it as a RFP of one group presenting against another group, but once his work, he wants to come in the fall and give some data at a checkpoint, which was one of the things I had asked for.
Right.
Again, was that quarterly checkpoint. So I feel like, if we look at October-ish, November, to be able to say this is what has happened the first quarter, and just to give a overview of the work that's happening in those schools would be appropriate.
Right, yeah, that's what I
Yes,
thought.
and so we agreed with him to do that, and I think he had been talking to Dr. Watley. So that was the plan, to give us a kind of a quarterly benchmark check-in. Yes,
Is the
ma'am.
same thing required from the other company? Like,
Yes.
can we get any information regarding what did happen last year, like very specific about how many trainings took place and what
Yes.
schools? I'll
Yes,
feel better knowing that information.
Yes, ma'am.
You got a question?
I do. How much time we got? Okay, so have there been any requests from other schools who are interested in working with GCC? And here's why I'm asking. So if they're saying we need $100,000 to serve 3 schools, is there equity for the rest of the schools in our district who may or may not want to work with GCC? Does the amount that we're spending make sense? Especially considering that we don't have any data that we can touch right now.
We have not had other schools to request to work with GCC. No, ma'am.
And are the 3 schools that currently are using their services, are they spending any of their school funds towards the work that's being done by GCC?
Are you asking where the funding is coming from?
Basically, I think.
I can get that information from you. I do not want to misspeak. I don't, they have their Fund 150 funds, and then we have our general funds. I don't want to misspeak. I can ask that question to see which pot of funds that's coming from, but offhand, I could not tell you.
Yes, ma'am.
But I can find out, and I will write that right here.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll keep that pulled from consent. We're going to move forward to future business. All right.
Wait. This isn't really future business, it's really more announcements, but I wanted to do it this week instead of next week because it's coming up soon. Everyone got the email about the Clark County Mentor Program breakfast, but I also work with the director's wife, and she wanted me to bring it up again and just make sure that everybody knew that they were invited to the annual breakfast. It's Tuesday, September 13th at 7:30. And Grace Bagwell Adams is going to be the keynote speaker. There's Mama's Boy breakfast, and everyone's invited. So if you do want to go, there's no cost, but they do want you to RSVP so that they know who will be there.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, because since we can do shameless plugs. Earlier, we were talking, I want to be obedient as you said, earlier someone asked about the about a construction program, but a shameless plug, Athens Land Trust, we are looking for young people who are interested in working in our Young Urban Builders program. So if each one of you would send me a person, I would be very happy.
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you all for that information. We are at 13, I think, right?
So moved.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hull, a second by Ms. Gallagher. Seeing that there are no objections, we are adjourned at 9:13 p.m.